Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Today podcast. I'm Lawrence Smith, the editor of Kentucky Today. Well, it's been a whirlwind week for Kentucky football. Mark Stoops officially fired Monday night and Will Stein hired on Tuesday morning. On top of it all, Kentucky Today sports editor Keith Taylor. I asked about all of this with Taylor, Kentucky football, as well as little Kentucky basketball. So, Keith, it's been quite a past few days for UK football fans, of course, and you've been on top of all of it. First of all, were you surprised at all that Mark Stoops was fired after the big loss at Louisville?
I was kind of not really, because he had a leash after they won 3 games in the beginning of October. They won 3 straight. And I thought maybe he's got some momentum and some push to come back. But then they lost to Vandy and Louisville in complete blowout losses. So honestly, I'm not surprised. Um, but one of the hardest things I think for Mr. Barnhart, was that when he forged a friendship with the coach for 13 seasons, it's kind of hard to break that friendship. But professionalism had to come involved, and I think there needed to be a change for UK football at this point.
You talked about the leash, perhaps, that he had after those 3 straight victories in the middle of the season. If Kentucky had won that Louisville game, or at least been competitive, do you think Mark Stoops would still be the coach?
I do. If they would have beaten Louisville, it would have been a mild upset. Give them a break-even season, and you're looking at a bowl game. So it's hard to let a coach go after you kind of come back from a poor start and then kind of gain momentum. So I think he would have been back after if they would have beaten Louisville. Yes.
You talked about the friendship that Stoops and Barnhart had kind of forged. Stoops is owed more than $30 million, I believe, right? In his contract.
37, yeah.
30, yeah. And it was due within 60 days originally, but they negotiated a longer term payout. What does that tell you about Stoops that he agreed to do that? Because he really could have held Kentucky over a barrel.
Yeah, I think he understood the position Kentucky was in. And I think that goes back to the friendship with Barnhart, that he's like, okay, so this is the program I built. This is the one I took to new heights. And this is the program that I want to make sure that, it's sustainable in the future. So Kentucky did him a favor with all the bonuses and incentives. So he turns around and does them a favor. So I think it was the mutual respect from Stoops and his folks about, making sure that, the program is sustainable and in a good place. Because you don't want to bankrupt the program.
Any thoughts on what's next for Stoops?
The way he talked in his press release, he loved Lexington. He loved being in Kentucky. So I would think, my guess is he would take a year off because his brother Bob coached at Oklahoma, and he left in his heyday. And so I think Mark may kind of take it easy. His dad coached high school football and died at a relatively early age because of the coaching back then, the toll it took on him. So Mark kind of understands, kind of like, you don't want to, you want to make sure you take care of yourself. I think that's one thing he would think of, but I don't see him getting into coaching next year. He may be an advisory role or something of that nature, but I think he'll really, if he gets back into coaching, it would have to be the right fit for him. It would have to be the right situation. I can see him being a defensive coordinator because a lot of coaches that have gotten fired have went back to being the coordinator or an assistant coach. And I think that could be a possibility given the situation that is right. I thought maybe he would go to Florida because of Summerall, who was hired at Florida. But Brad White has taken that position, which I think is a good move for Brad. So I think he would take the year off. I don't see him immediately jumping back into the fray.
Turning to the new coach, Will Stein. signed very quickly, I think less than 24 hours after the official announcement was made. So do you think that had already been in the works?
It goes back to what I said about early in the season, before they got those 3 wins. I think if UK hadn't got those 3 wins, they would have moved quicker and faster. But I think, like I said, the leash kind of. But I think Barnhart. Anytime you're in a position of leadership in athletics, especially college, the landscape changes consistently. It's kind of like, just you never know what's going to happen. So 2 years ago, Stoops was going to take the job at Texas A&M, and so that fell through. So I think that from that point on, I think Barnhart had a plan in the back of his mind, a plan of A, B, and C, in case departure or firing was down the pipe. Um, if you're a good athletic director, if you're a good leader, you've always got to have a backup plan, scenario in case he takes another job, he gets fired, you just never he passes away. You got to have a backup plan in place, and I think Barnhart did. Knowing him, um, he probably had a 50-50 mind, had a backup plan, and so he knew what he was going to do and went after his man.
So why Stein? Why Will Stein, do you think?
I think Will is one of the most innovative minds in college football. He's a younger coach. He's from Kentucky, kind of like Mark Pope. He played at Kentucky, but Stein is a different scenario, but a similar case. Stein grew up a Kentucky fan. His dad, Matt, played for the Wildcats in the 80s, so he has ties. He played at Louisville, as you know, a quarterback. So I think his love for Kentucky football, being around it, going up around it, I think that was very beneficial in his decision and was a no-brainer for him to come back to Kentucky.
You mentioned Will Stein is former University of Louisville quarterback, and Louisville fans are joking that Kentucky had to turn to a Louisville Cardinal to turn their program around. I'm sure you've heard that. But what do UK fans think about that?
I think they have an open mind about it. Kind of similar to when Kenny Payne took the basketball opening at Louisville. They cheering for him. They want him to do well. So I think I don't even think I've heard a lot of chatter about his career at Louisville. But naturally it's a rivalry, and so I mean I would say to Louisville fans that they had to turn to their own to turn their football program around and Coach Bob. So you know I think Coach Bob's doing a fine job at Louisville, and I think Will do fine here. He knows the expectations. The bar is higher than when Mark took over. Mark raised the bar, and now it's somebody else's turn to take over the reins. And I think you can stay at one place for too long. I mean, you can overstay your at one place for too. That's my personal opinion. It happened to Calipari, and it happened to Mark Stoops.
Of course, Wildcat fans can say that Louisville turned to a former Wildcat, Howard Schnellenberger, to save their program. So there you go.
Yes, yes, that was back in the 80s, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Is Stein, or do you know, is Stein going to remain at Oregon? He's Oregon offensive coordinator, and they're going to be in the playoffs. Is he going to stay with Oregon until that season is over? And if so, how does that impact recruiting?
I think we always got to have a plan in place as far as here in the Bluegrass in Kentucky and Lexington to recruit. And I think he may have some people on Stoops' staff that can handle that in the interim. A lot of coaches do that. They'll use their previous staff in the interim to help keep the recruits here. And I'm sure he has his own recruits he wants to try to get to Kentucky. But as far as the playoffs in Oregon, um, they they got 12 games in, 11 or 12 games in already. They know what they're doing. They know the system. And the only thing he has to go in and do is call the plays. I mean, that's a lot easier than beginning of the season when you have to get everything in place. They already know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So there wouldn't be a lot of coaching involved. It'd be more like play calling and making sure the team is prepared. So there's a difference there's difference. But here, he would have to kind of recruit. So there he's going to call plays. He's
And
going to
build a
recruit here.
staff.
Yeah. So I think you can juggle that.
Stoops, of course, was the winningest UK coach in history in terms of number of wins. What do you think success under Stein, as far as UK fans go, it has to look like?
In a 9-game SEC schedule.
Exactly.
That's going to be a change. I think fans generally want 8 to 9 wins a year, and if they get 10, it's like icing on the cake. Anything more than 10 is icing on the cake. They just want to be competitive in the SEC, be in the middle or upper echelon, because Vandy, if you remember, was in the bottom of the pack with them, and look at where they are. Kentucky fans don't take it very well when Vandy's playing better and reaching better than they are. So they're in the same boat Vandy was about 3 years ago with Clark Lee. And so you just have to find the right players. You have to dig deep, and you still have to. I believe you still have to develop players. Go find some diamonds in the rough. Get some G codes, get some NIL, but you can't totally depend on NIL because you don't know the chemistry factor. You don't know. You might know they've got talent, but you don't know the chemistry factor behind the players you get. So that's why you've got to develop freshmen, high school players that are coming in, develop them and keep them. That's going to be the key for college athletics, in my opinion.
And beat Louisville, of course.
that would be on the top of the
list. One quick basketball question before we end. Is it time for Wildcat fans to hit the panic button after the loss to North Carolina?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Kentucky was without 2 of its top players, Lowe and Debate. So those 2 players have not played in 3 or 4 games. So they're still trying to juggle replacements and everything in between that. And you have to remember, Jaden Acquaintance has still not played yet. The big guy, big fella. So he could be playing at any moment, any time. So I think, though it's like they've had some injuries and they're still trying to figure it out. I think they would have beaten North Carolina with those 2 players. And I think Louisville was a toss-up because Louisville's a pretty darn good team. Louisville's got a good team. And I think Kentucky was missing some players that they need to be successful. And if they can get those 2 guys or 3 guys back for SEC play, I think it'll be a better outcome.
Of course, they have a brutal schedule coming up with Gonzaga and then Alabama later on in the month.
And you got St. John's in Atlanta.
St. John's, yes.
And then you also got Indiana coming up.
So tough schedule. So I'm sure UK fans are hoping those players come back pretty quickly.
And the good news is, when you have a team that's got injuries and they are competing like they did against North Carolina and Louisville, with the injury, I think they learn and they grow. And that's a plus. Anytime you can have players that can develop and grow under that circumstance, it gives you more depth. And you know what to expect from people off the bench. Kentucky's biggest issue last night at North Carolina was rebounding. They got hammered on the glass, and they've got to really shore that up. And I think that's where they were missing Debate. Debate is a real physical player in the post. He can rebound, and they were missing that against Carolina last night.
Keith, thank you. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. You too.
And appreciate the work you do for Kentucky Today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Lawrence.
And that's Keith Taylor, the sports editor for Kentucky Today, bringing in now our managing editor, Mark Maynard, and content editor, Chip Hutchison. Chip, since you're wearing the UK jacket, we'll start with you. Give me your take on Stoops out and Stein in.
Well, I think it was obvious that Stoops, the final 2 games, certainly sealed his doom if it was not sealed already, and those 2 very humiliating losses. And I think all of Big Blue Nation knew it was time for a regime change, just as it was a few years ago with Calipari and the basketball program. Will Stein seems like a great choice to me. because of his love for the University of Kentucky. He is an offensive mind. They've got to put points on the board, and certainly he can do that. I think he'll have a good quarterback in Cutter Boley. Hopefully, he can help him to become an even better quarterback. So it's a situation of, I think it can only go up.
Mark, you're a UK fan as well. Your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, it was certainly time for Stoops to go, and I do like it. It's been a necessary ending, but a good ending too. He's been gracious in a lot of ways, talking about his appreciation for the fans and the players who played for him and all that. And of course, he signed the contract that he gets the $38 million, and he could have said, I need it right now, 60 days, but he's going to spread it over, 4 or 5 years. So, that he didn't have to do that. So I think, that was gracious, although he's still getting some pretty good money for not having to do anything, but that's okay.
I'll take that,
Yeah, exactly. So I think, they needed somebody young, and they got that. Will is 36 years old. Everywhere he's been, his offense has excelled, high 30-point averages at all his stops. So he's obviously a very good offensive-minded coach. And I think back to when Hal Mumme was at Kentucky in the 90s, and people had fun. It was more fun to lose 40-35 than 10-3, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll score some points anyway, and I think he'll get good players in. A young coach is good for that, and it will be interesting. I think these next however long Oregon lasts in the playoffs, and I know they want to last as long as they can, and they're very capable of winning 2 or 3 games, or maybe even winning it all. And he's going to be with them, and I know what Keith was saying in that it can be, they've done it all year. They can, just kind of flip the switch, but you got to think about scouting. You got to think about, all that kind of thing. A lot of preparation that goes into each week. You don't just flip the switch to everybody. I mean, somewhat, but there's a lot of preparation that has to be done, and he's not going to sell them short. And as far as UK staff helping, I don't know. Is that going to be the staff? Who's going to be there? It'll be interesting. He's got a tough assignment to do that, but I like what they've what they have in him, and his mother runs a bakery in Louisville, Lawrence, and he got on Kentucky Sports Radio. They interviewed her yesterday, and it was really interesting. They sold all kinds of cakes and things.
Well, it'll certainly juice that rivalry with Stein being a former Louisville quarterback.
Yeah, and the Keith maybe not have heard, but there'd been a lot of Louisville chatter about
yes,
about
there has
Kentucky getting him, but it's good, it's fun. The reception he got at Rep Arena last night at the game, he went out and made the Y, as they do with their celebrity people, and but boy, he got an ovation. And that's good to see. And, they're having the big press conference today, which will, be full house probably. And I'm sure he's excited. He should be.
Yeah. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, right before his big news conference. Of course, Louisville fans are just worried that Penn State doesn't offer a fortune to Jeff Brom and we lose him. So we'll see.
Yeah. Penn State's, Brom's got to be in line there with, they thought they had the BYU guy and he's not coming. So it'd be hard to turn down Penn State, I think.
Yeah. Mark, quickly, give us a behind the scenes look at how we kept readers informed about this rapidly unfolding story. I know lots of late nights.
Yeah, for sure. When Stoops was fired, of course, Keith was on it, and Keith stays on top of things pretty well, and I do too. Just being a fan, really, just trying to keep up with everything, and we got the Stoops firing story in pretty quickly, and the hiring story was a little different because through the night there were several media reports that were saying he's their guy. He's the one that they're going after. And I'm always hesitant about jumping on that. There's one thing about being first, but there's another thing about being wrong. So, I wanted to make sure we were on the right track, but the more I saw Keith, he had called and said, "What do you think? You want to go with it? You want to go with it?" And finally, I said, "Yeah, let's go with it." I saw enough that I felt like, reputable people who were saying he's the one. So Keith wrote the story, sent it to me. We put it up. That was about, I don't know, 7:30, I think, Sunday night. And, okay, we figure the next day that's when it's going to happen officially and all that. So I was, I was still up after 11. My wife and I were watching a Hallmark Christmas movie, So, but I was also perusing the online, and boom, that pops up about 5 after 11. And it said, he's officially going to be the coach. And I was like, oh my, okay. I didn't want to call Keith, and I figured he'd written so much stuff lately. I was like, I'll just take care of it. And so I just revamped the story a little bit to say it's official, he's the man, and here we go. So got through with that about 11:30 or so. But that's just the way of life with those kind of things. It really is. And with the things we do, and it's real exciting to write about stuff like that.
News is 24/7, 365, as you both will know. Chip, I'm going to wrap this section up with you, asking the same question I asked Keith. And this is about basketball. Is it time to panic about UK basketball? Quickly.
Well, I don't. I think Keith was pretty tactful in how he answered that. It's obvious. Mark and I have talked at length about this. Kentucky is not ready to play those elite teams right now, but it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. I don't really care how much happens this time of year, but once we get into February and then March, hopefully they'll be ready. It's obvious what the deficiencies are. Keith talked about that. They couldn't get a rebound defensively. They were a little bit weak with the ball inside. They couldn't hit shots. They were 1 for 13. Surely that's going to improve. They're going to have to improve if they're going to do anything in the SEC. So, if we can get those players back, of course, everybody has players who are injured, but especially the big man. If he can come back from that ACL injury that he had in March, all the reports are he's looking great in practice. If he can come back, they'll be okay.
Let's talk Lane Kiffin for a moment. Not a local story, but lots of interest among our Kentucky Today readers. Mark, your thoughts on Lane Kiffin leaving his playoff-bound Ole Miss team, going to LSU. Does this say more about Lane Kiffin or more about college football?
I think it's a little more about college football, but it's some about Lane Kiffin too, and he could definitely use some a PR person to handle some of his talking points. But the whole system is set up so crazy, to be honest, that they have to leave when their teams are still playing. And Ole Miss, he wanted to stay on and coach, and Ole Miss said, no thanks. You didn't want to be with us. So goodbye. We're cutting our ties with you. And I don't blame them one bit for that. So, and then he made it worse by, of course, the first thing how, it was like, oh, I want to help this team do the best they can. I want to be with them all this time. And then when they said no, he said, well, okay, I'm going to poach players. I'm going to poach your assistant coaches. In other words, I'm going to hurt this team. The team that I just said I loved. So, obviously Mississippi fans did not take well to it. They sent him off in a kind of, railroaded him out of town. I guess really.
Booms as he boarded the plane for LSU. So
yeah, and with some unkind comments and such. But and I understand them being hurt over that too. You really do. On the other hand, he's got a $90 million contract, and I think any of us would probably take that on as well. But it's going to be interesting when they go to Mississippi next year. They play at Ole Miss, and they also play at Alabama. So those will be two games that everybody's going to be circling on their calendars next year.
Yeah, big money, but as the Bible says, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So we'll see.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah. Chip, Mark mentioned some of the comments that Kiffin made, maybe needing a PR person, but there have been some questions raised now about some of the comments that he made on the way out.
Yes, and as we've discussed, if there was ever you want to write a guide for how not to leave an organization, that's the playbook, because everything that he did from my vantage point was wrong. He had a meeting with the players, and then he reported that the players wanted him to stay. Well, then some of the players, there were 3 that got on and said, ask anybody in the room, that was not the case. So your credibility, your integrity is certainly being questioned. And, I think we all would agree, and our listeners would agree, college football and college athletics is a mess. And it's all about the money. Loyalty for coaches, loyalty for players has gone out the window. It's kind of like, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. Situation where players leave. We have football, basketball players who leave. They go to 4 different schools in 4 years, and that does not endear the fans. And college athletics is going to suffer. I think it already has suffered credibility. And then what Mark will be talking about here in a few minutes about the gambling only makes it worse.
Yeah, I want to go to that quickly. You're right about everybody chasing the money, but Mark, we ran an editorial this past week on the high cost of sports betting, written primarily by you. Your concern was prompted by something that's going on in Ohio. Talk about what led you to really want to write that editorial.
Yeah, it was, of course, Governor Mike DeWine basically said, I wish I hadn't signed this bill about gambling, and if I could, I would take it back, because he has seen what has happened with that. And in particular, he saw where 2 Cleveland Guardian pitchers were suspended, and probably suspended for life. And if they may spend a lot of time in prison for some gambling and some things they did with that. And I think he just sees that, and he sees just everything that is bad about gambling. The money, everybody's waving the money, of course, and the legislators and things are like, yeah, let's go we want some of that. We want some of that money. And there is a lot of money with it. There's no question about that. But what price is it, to your state, to your community, to your families? We know, we've seen it. We've seen what gambling does to people. And now it's basically in everybody's back pocket. And it's kids, and they're learning about gambling now, and they're, the pro model, all of them are supporting the gambling product as well. They don't want their athletes gambling, but they're in bed with them. So, what do you expect is going to happen? What could go wrong, right? If we do this. So I just think it's a big problem. It's a problem in Kentucky. It's a problem in Ohio. It's a problem nationwide, and it's just getting worse. I don't see it getting better. I don't know. You can repeal things, I guess. I mean, you have to have a vote, and I don't know that people would vote any gambling out. Is what's kind of sad about the whole thing. But I know we have taken stands against it from the very beginning, and I know we will continue to, because we know what that kind of thing can do to families. And when kids are left hungry because dad has gambled away his paycheck, that's a problem. And we see that kind of thing happening in Kentucky, Ohio, and everywhere, really.
In fact, right now, a man's being prosecuted for allegedly threatening U of L coach Jeff Brom over a bet that he lost. So it's really insidious. It really infects an entire culture.
It really does. Yeah, that's a good point. And that guy bet $80,000 on a game. I mean, I just can you even imagine? And that's what we're dealing with. You're dealing with that kind of money. When somebody loses that, they're gonna lose their minds. Any of us probably would, to be honest. But yeah, he took it a little too far, and he's going to spend some time in jail. There's no doubt about it.
Well, lots of sports in our program today, but it was of great interest to Kentucky Today readers and big news across the state. So we'll let it go at that. But you can read those stories and much more on KentuckyToday.com. While you're there, sign up for our daily email, morning briefing. And for more on the Kentucky Baptist Convention and on the cooperative program that makes this program and all that we do possible, go to kybaptist.org. We'll see you next time, Lord willing, on the Kentucky Today podcast.